Okay, everybody, I finished my ball animation and let's see how it looks. I added my in-betweens, I smoothed out my animation. There's a couple of cases where I didn't have a squash or stretch. I went ahead and added that. And then if you look at the timeline, I extended each keyframe by adding a frame to each one so that, like industry standard, each frame lasts for 2 frames. It's basically you're animating on twos. Each keyframe lasts for 2 frames. So it's the same thing as in the days of yore when animation drawings were filmed, you would expose each drawing twice. So let's see how that looks. It's a bit rough, it's not perfect, but you see how how the ball enters from the top left and then ricochets from side to side and even speeds up a little as the quote valley in the middle there gets smaller towards the bottom, and then the ball kind of slowly settles and rolls to a stop. If I really wanted to go crazy, I would actually have the ball settle, roll to a stop, overshoot, and then roll to a stop again. But this is fine for now. And what I did too, I created a ref layer because we're gonna go ahead and add our tail, but I wanted to create a new blank layer, and I drew in what our tail is going to look like. I turned that into a guide layer by, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. Nope, I didn't mean to do that either. I turned it into a guide layer by either right clicking it or control clicking it. Okay? And when you turn it into a guide layer, it's a layer that is literally acting as a guide for you. You could have a size reference there, and it will not show up in your final export. So I'm going to go ahead and lock everything off. And I'm going to go ahead and create a layer, and I'm going to call it tail. And for illustration purposes, I'm going to draw in a different layer. I'm going to draw in a different color. I'm going to draw the tail in a different color, and I'm going to go ahead and turn our ref layer to outline mode so we still see it, but it's not in the way. And outline mode is only for the view. When you view the work, you can see something, but it's not, you can see through it, so it's not in the way. So let's go ahead and if the ball is falling and I'm imagining that the tail is like attached, if you want, like, do your best. Actually, sometimes for best purposes, I like to have the tail on top, but you might want to change it later and have it be underneath. I'm going to go ahead and create a corresponding blank keyframe for every layer that we draw, for every frame that we draw the tail into. So there we go. So now for our next ball pose, I'm going to add another blank keyframe. See? So the ball is like hitting the side there, and the tail is still up. I'm going to go ahead and add a blank keyframe there. So the ball is coming down, the tail is coming down too, but a little slower than the ball. And then notice how the tail is kind of settling down, but kind of working in its own arc. You're following the shape of the tail. Now you're imagining that the tail is like still attached to the back. And the tail is like actually following its own arc. And notice how the reference is still there, so I'm kind of using it as reference. So notice that the tail is still following along behind the ball, but still following the same arc it just came from. It's okay to stretch it out. I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit with stretching. See how in the timeline I'm creating a blank keyframe for every drawing of the tail, and I'm working on another layer. And notice how I'm working straight ahead. Let me save. Command S. Always Command S every couple of minutes. Notice how I'm working frame by frame. I'm using the animation principle of straight ahead animation. Instead of, I posed out the ball, I planned out the ball poses. The tail's looking a little long. Let me erase it in. But now that I'm happy with the ball's poses, the ball is leading the tail. So now I could just go ahead and frame by frame follow the ball's action. I like to put the onion skin on, so now I'm imagining that the tail is like still attached. So since the ball is already kind of, the tail is still trailed behind. Blank keyframe. So since the ball is like, so now I'm kind of imagining that since the ball bounced, is turned around, I'm imagining that the tail is kind of behind and like turning around, see? I almost feel like maybe I could even... And by the way, when I erased, unlike Photoshop, when you're working with other layers, this is what happens when you don't lock off a layer. So it could be like, you know, if you're working in Photoshop, you could erase on another layer. It won't affect the layer underneath. Let's say I only want to erase part of this tail. Whoops. Eraser. Let me erase. Oh my God, I just erased the layer underneath as well. Always lock off layers that you're not working on so you avoid accidentally erasing part of your background. Okay, the tail's looking a little long, so I can go ahead with the transform tool, move that anchor point. So see how I'm following that arc. The ball is leading the tail, but I'm referring to the arc that the tail just came from. And I always like to, sometimes I like to drag the playhead and see how it's looking. Okay, that's not bad. That one kind of still bugs me. So since he's turning, I want to give it like a little more depth since it's turning. I would almost want to have like one more in between there, but I almost want to have some fun with this since the ball is kind of about to... So it looks kind of cool, like the tail is like... But usually the tail is the last to catch up. So now... So the tail's like kind of following. And having the onion skin on helps determine like that arc. And if it's starting to look, if you're starting to lose the size, it's okay to adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my tails. I'll see you in a second. Okay, I finished adding my tail, and there we have it. We have a bouncing ball bouncing from side to side with a tail. We are implementing the animation principle of follow through and overlapping actions. So there we have the overlap of the tail as the ball bounces. And what was really tricky at the bottom, when the ball rolls, don't forget the tail is actually attached. So I actually have the ball attached to the same point. So then when the ball goes back, the tail is still attached at the same point. So it was like tricky, but you're giving the illusion that the tail is attached in the same spot, at the base where it attaches to the ball. And we're also implementing squash and stretch, of course, and also arcs. Arcs are very important in this. And there you have it. This is one of my favorite tutorials to do, and whenever I demonstrate this in front of a class, there's always such a great result. This is such a fun exercise. So thanks for listening, and hit me in the comments if you have any questions.